Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum assalam, brother Dickinson. How are you, sir?
Walaikum assalam.
Alhamdulillah. Can you
And
hear me?
I can hear you, and I'm assuming everyone else can hear you.
Sure. Uh,
Yeah, everyone else is muted. So if you have any question, I'm talking to everyone on the call. If you have any question or you have any trouble listening or anything, just start the chat. Put the question or whatever that problem is on the chat, so that we can see and we can fix the issue. So I'm handing over this to Brother Dickinson. Brother Dickinson, please go ahead. Hello, assalamu
okay.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina al-Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the innumerable blessings that He bestows upon us at every instant. As I always say, blessings we can never truly appreciate, because this is based, of course, off of Allah Azza wa Jal saying to us, وَإِن تُعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا, that if you were to ever try and count any blessing of Allah, indeed, there is no blessing of Allah that can be enumerated nor counted. So, after saying that, we, I'm sure, have been, mashallah, experiencing the intense and strange times that we're in. However, I don't think it's of any value to reiterate that. And even the social media has been blowing up with I'm not just talking about the news and reports of what's going on, but a lot of information is out there from different shuyukh and different ulama across the world about how we should reply or act in such times. In general, I mean, it's not like these things don't happen, and it's not like humanity hasn't had things like this happen to them before. Perhaps the reason why it's a little bit more wide scale is because of the nature of the world we live in, which is ajib for many reasons. Maybe this is really one of the major lessons of all of this, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing His true qudra to everyone. Then in the modern world, when man assumes that they have so much power over everything, it's very easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shut everything down with something that we can't even see. That is with the naked eye. We can see it with a microscope, but not a naked eye. But you get the point. We assume that man has reached such a level of advancement. This is kind of, as I always talked about in our classes before, these are ideologies that respond in the modern era with the idea of Karl Marx and many other people that man, its destiny of man and being, as they called it, meaning the existence of man, is a destiny that's understood through history, and that man is constantly evolving and to a certain point, and then they had different ideas of what that evolution meant, whether it was Karl Marx or people like Nietzsche. So again, that's, you may think, why is he talking about that? Well, because this is the influence of the modern world, these philosophers, these thought processes, and these ideologies. And because of the technological advancements as well, we're assuming so much about ourselves that we are reaching this kind of pinnacle and height of human existence, as if the pinnacle and height of the human existence is the dunya. And that is the key point here, because for us, we don't understand it that way. We don't understand the dunya as the key point of human existence, or let's say the pinnacle of human existence. Far from it. The dunya is a test. The dunya is some say, either it can come from dunul, which means to be close, and if that's the case, the dunya would mean something that is in front of you. Some say that it's derived from dini, which means literally despicable, something that is despised and despicable in its nature. If that's the case, then it would mean the dunya is something that has no value, which, like, there's a very well-known hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Law kanat ad-dunya inda Allahi, ta'dilu inda Allahi janaha ba'udah," that if this dunya was equivalent even to a mosquito wing, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not give even one drink of water to a disbeliever. That could be also what we mean when we say dunya, something has no value. So for us as believers, that should have always been our understanding, that this world that we're living in now is not one to fret over. It's not one to think that this is the be-all and end-all of human existence. In fact, far from it. It is only the beginning. In fact, in retrospect, in terms of all the other phases of existence we have to go through after death, which is, of course, the barzakh, the life in the qabr, and the day of Qiyamah, 50 عام, right? 50,000 is 50 ألف عام, excuse me. So 50,000 years. And then, of course, the akhirah, in which time is not counted. Well, if you look at it from that perspective, mathematically, no sum when brought up into infinity turns to anything. It's a zero, it's nothing. So when we look at it from that perspective, the dunya is not at all, not even slightly, the pinnacle of human achievement or destiny. Why am I saying that? Is because a lot of the reasons why people feel so afraid, to be honest with you, is because this is all they have. They value this world and only this world, and they believe that this is the achievements that's worthy of their time and their concern. So anything that would cause them some discomfort, it will cause them that kind of fear. For us, we're not saying that you don't need to be careful and take precautions. It's kind of like last week when I mentioned the two hadith of Bukhari, which are in the same chapter, where in one breath the Prophet ﷺ said La adwa, which means literally there's no such thing as a contingent or a contagious disease, excuse me. And then in the next breath, the hadith that I mentioned, that he commanded people to prevent a sick camel from watering with other camels who may be healthy, to prevent disease from spreading. Both are in the same chapter and both are in Sahih Bukhari. So how do we understand it without getting into a long discussion? It's very simple. La adwa, that hadith is basically, its meaning is to be understood in context of our aqidah, that we don't see anything that happens in the universe or anything that comes into effect in the universe as being independent outside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudrah and his power. And that's the bottom line. Everything that happens, it only happens by the will of Allah, the Mashiach of Allah. So all that we covered in our previous classes. So this is to protect the aqidah of the Muslim, that what they see going on, it is not a germ that causes it. That is the outward. And the outward is not what's going on. It's actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudra and Mashiach, his power and will, that's making it all happen. The inward is that, or the reality rather. But we also respect the fact that Allah had created it. So it has a reality and it is there and we should respect it. In other words, we don't challenge Allah's order, the khalq wal amr. Allah creates and he has the command over creation. So when he creates certain things, whether it's, for instance, diseases, then he creates it to serve a purpose and it will serve that purpose. So we look at it with that view, that it is all from Allah, but it's there by Allah's commandment. And whatever Allah's commandment is in regarding to that thing, it will perform accordingly. Right? Everything will do what it's supposed to do according to the way that Allah has created it and for what purpose Allah created it. So we respect the fact that, yes, if we know deep down that we should be certain that it's all from Allah, nothing happens without Allah. But we also know that if that's the case, Allah created it, it has a purpose. So we should not challenge Allah's command. We should not challenge Allah's wisdom and that it is here. So what do I mean by that? That, we should take precautions, obviously, and we should be careful, but we should not be overly concerned. Not that we want to, Allah forbid, be stricken by such a disease. We always ask Allah again for afiyah. And that too we only do because this is what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. There's a hadith of Tirmidhi where the Prophet ﷺ passed by a man who was extremely ill. And when he inquired to why he felt the way he did, he said, I asked Allah to punish me for my sins in this world before I reach him in the akhirah. And which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't punish him, in other words, in the akhirah. At that, Rasulullah said that you shouldn't do that. Rather, you should always ask Allah for afiyah, which is to be protected from all mishaps and misfortunes and the general well-being, including sicknesses and the like. So we're taught that. And that is also part of the adab and etiquette with Allah. In other words, who are you challenging when you think that you are ready or prepared to face such types of um, hardships. It's not befitting of the servant to choose. However, if Allah does decide to test someone, then that test is to be understood that it's with Allah's knowledge and hikmah and wisdom. And for whatever reason, not every test is a punishment. And that's what the other part of it is that you have to see Allah's rahmah in everything. This is what Rasulullah said, even the plague, which is much worse, it is a source of rahmah for the believer, because the believer attains a rank in the hereafter through it, which is basically shahada, and they are shaheed. But other people, it's not the same. Going back to the original point, what I'm saying is a lot of the fear, the environment of panic and uncertainty should never be there. We can fear something, but we have to overcome it, and we have to be thankful for our blessings that we already have and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us, and then thereafter go on with our lives as normally as we can and try to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these times, that we learn that lesson. And it is that what we shouldn't fear at that level, because the dunya is not the end. The dunya was never, in our viewpoint, this is why when we're listening too much of the media, that's the other side of things. For them, the dunya is everything. So if something hurts them in that regard, is considered to be, that this is, nothing could be worse. Well, we know that things can be much worse. And that the pain that anyone feels in this dunya is only but temporary. And as the Prophet ﷺ said about the plague, it is a rahmah for the believer. So we don't worry about it, but it's that deep psyche that people have developed because of these ideologies. Because Christians, even in the past, although of course we don't agree with them theologically, but even they understood when Christianity was more prevalent in Western society, even they understood things like this, that the world is not the place for them, even more so. We say the world is a place of test, and the world is temporary, and the world is not our destiny. However, they used to say the world is the devil's, that the devil rules the world, and that it is a wicked place. That is Christian theology. So it used to be in the Western world too, that they would view things like this, like the plague or any other trials, as that's just the nature of the world, because the world is wicked. Now, you may say that, well, you said earlier, dani, or to be despicable, could be a possible root word of dunya, in which we would also say that the world is despicable. But despicable and wicked are not the same things. In other words, to think that it's an evil place and there's no good in it, we're not saying that. It's ajib that the Prophet ﷺ said, according to him, that Isa, well, not according, of course, he spoke the truth, but he related the tradition of Isa alayhi salam, where Isa alayhi salam is reported to have said, "Ad-dunya mazrat al-akhirah," that the world that we live in is literally the field, and when you grow crops, the mazra'ah, where you grow crops. This is the field for the akhirah, meaning that this dunya is where you plant the seeds of the akhirah. This dunya is the place where you earn the akhirah. And from that perspective, it sheds light on the fact that we don't say that the dunya is evil. We say it's temporary, and compared to the akhirah, it is paltry, in that sense, beneath, right? It is nothing. It's minuscule, not worthy of our attention. Just as the hadith I mentioned before, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that if it was equivalent to Allah, januha ba'uda, if it was even equal to a mosquito wing, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not give a drink of water to anyone who disbelieved in him. So we put that in perspective in order to lessen the fear of these things, because it's not worthy of us becoming panicked. We should respect the order of Allah, that it's there, and we should never try to challenge Allah by thinking that we can be brave enough to shoulder on our, to take on our shoulders that kind of pain or that kind of sickness. However, we do know that it's not something, this is the point, right, to make us rattled, because the world is not anything for you to get rattled up about. It's destined to end. It has a beginning, it has an end. But human existence, that's the more important thing, is not going to end here. For those who think of it that way, this is indeed something that is extremely terrifying. The perspectives are very terrifying, not only because of the fact that really, relatively speaking, a lot of people, worst case scenario, may die, but in the relative picture of things, it's still not even a quarter of the population. So, not trying to say that anyone who dies from this is not a big deal, but that's not, the idea is that people are overly panicked about it, but it's not like everyone is going to die. Unless, of course, see, for us as Muslims, we say, well, if Allah so wills, it can mutate and become worse or become unstoppable. But that's highly unlikely that's what's going to happen. Last night I was reading Surah Al-An'am and certain ayat that spoke about Allah's punishment and how He sends these things, darra, and different types of trials to people, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ, right? So perhaps they would become humble. The interesting thing about these ayat is that it mentioned that after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after all these trials, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the doors of everything. بَابَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, right? Like everything now. In other words, the type of prosperity and happiness that people experience after these trials is as if everything's going their way. However, the ultimate result of that is destruction. It's ajib that once the trial comes, in order to humble people, the idea is that most people don't humble themselves. And that's what I was saying earlier, that we see that as much power as we think we have, and as much as these ideologies drive home this utopian idea of man's existence, its pinnacle being here and now, and that history over time will show what that is, which is very speculative, and Allahu A'lam where they're even going with that. But the idea I'm saying is that they tried so hard with all that they've done in the past, century to create this perfect world, and then Allah does this, right? لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ, to show them that really they should be humble, that life is fragile, and it was never meant to be, this world was never meant to be the place that it was the be-all and end-all of their aspirations. However, how many people will take that lesson? That's the key factor, because believe me, this will pass. It'll end eventually. At some time or the other, this will come to an end. But the real question for us and everyone is, what lesson did you derive from it? After all it's said and done, how did that affect you? Did you use that time to actually think about your own mortality and say that, yeah, this world is not everything for me, and we all have to go, and it could be very easily, if it's not this, if it's not, COVID-19, it's something else. And Allah knows what it could be. Even you will die in perfect health, right? Doesn't matter. We all have that time is coming for all of us. Ajnul musamma cannot be, la yu'akhkhar. It's never going to be postponed when Allah decides. That was a reality we should have all been thinking about already. Now, even after that, we should think about the humility of it all. Is exactly that, is that this world was never meant to be perfect. You should have been very humble, and you should have thought to yourself that no matter how hard we try, we cannot make this world perfect, and we're not going to have everything our way. There are times and there are places where Allah will show us that لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَضَرَّعُونَ, so we can become humble. Will humanity do that? Probably not. This is what these ayat are saying, that usually what happens afterwards, everything goes their way right after. Everything's back to normal. Life goes back to the way it was, and they forget what had happened already. Right? They forget very quickly. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in His wisdom does not allow these things until the last day comes, until the last hour of this world. These things will not overcome all of humanity, no matter how many people it affects. Most people will survive because they're supposed to be wake-up calls. And but they're not going to affect everyone in that way. I guess the key question then would be for all of us is, are we taking that lesson? Is this a wake-up call for us, that how fragile our life is and how mortality affects us all? We cannot escape that reality. And then be happy, first of all, for what we have. And then second of all, the other thing I was thinking about, of course, that we should remind ourselves is that the way that we behave at this point in time shows a lot about who we are as people. We've seen that Muslims have become very emotional about the fact that the haram was empty for a while, although they had not completely shut it down. They had just restricted movement and certain areas of the haram. I don't know how reliable the reports are. I've seen recently that apparently some of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was shut, and then I think in the haram too. I'm not sure what exactly the validity of those reports are. The haram also, they didn't do khutbah. I'm not sure, but we know that here in Pittsburgh, most of the masajid did not have khutbah. I am not going to get into that issue, because I think this is one of the things I wanted to say is we need to have more love and respect for each other in these times than we ever had before. So whatever side you take, I personally don't believe that there should be a complete shutdown of the masajid unless and until it is required. So what I mean by that is even if just one person remains in the masjid to call the idhan and make the salah, this would be the best thing to do, because we shouldn't abandon completely the masajid and the worship of Allah in these times, of course. I mean, there are many accounts of this. There's books even now that were just written by non-Muslims about the Christian and Muslim responses to the plague in the Middle Ages. And you'll see that in these cases, there were whole villages that were wiped out by the plague in certain parts of the Muslim world, and nobody shut the masjid. I mean, something to think about. I understand, again, the point of some scholars and some people out there who think it's wise for us not to do it. We're not going to argue about that. But all I'm saying is, historically, as a precedent, the Muslim Ummah never really did it to that scale, to that they just shut down wholesale all the masajid, because these things have happened, and even much worse. Like I said, sometimes whole cities, whole villages were wiped out. There's plenty of du'as. The best du'as, of course, are the ones that the Prophet ﷺ had relayed to us, which are abundant. Perhaps we can send some out to the group, because there's more than one. There's a lot, and perhaps maybe even it's a good idea to start a class regarding those du'as, like what du'as to make and when. There's too many that can be recounted right now. I mean, for instance, in the morning and evening, it's a very simple thing you can do after Fajr and after Maghrib, is to say Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis samai wa huwa as-sami'ul alim 3 times. The Prophet ﷺ used to make dua and for protection from these kind of trials. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min jahd al-bala' wa darak al-shaqa wa shatatat al-a'da. There's so many, we don't, these are just examples. And in this dua, he sought refuge from overwhelming trials that are too hard for you to bear. In other words, I think I've said this before in other classes, that in other du'as also the Prophet ﷺ sought refuge in death by drowning, min al-gharaq. And there are certain hadith that mention that drowning, if you die by drowning, it's also, you get the rank of a shaheed. So why would he make dua to be protected from it? Because this is according to the rank of the person, and their iman. So some people would actually maybe even question God, or even be upset with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if they die very painfully. So obviously that's not good. So that's why he made dua from overwhelming trials that do not put you close to Allah, but rather make you further away from Him, and because you're not happy with or content with the decree of Allah. That's part of what's going on now too. If we're going to look inwardly, then how do we react to it? Are we, if it's something that has made us reflective and made us think about our mortality and made us regret our past and make tawbah and increase our ibadah and dhikr, that's a rahmah. That's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to see the fadl and the mercy of Allah and everything, and that is a mercy from Allah. If it's done the opposite, then we need to take a stock of ourselves and think about why we feel that way. But in all cases, of course, we ask Allah for afiyah for that reason. It's interesting that Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala said that patience is in of itself a virtue that's not sought after because it is a virtue in itself. It's because of what it leads to, which is contentment. But shukr, if you understand what I just said, again, I'll read it. He said that sabr in and of itself is not a virtue that by itself is what is to be attained. It's because it makes you attain a state which is contentment. But shukr is gratitude is something that in and of itself is a good quality. To feel be grateful to Allah for the blessings that we have. So certain people, especially if we are weaker in our iman and the power of our iman, in other words, quwwat al-iman, then it's better for us to be thankful and then to be tried. And because at trials, not everyone passes, right? In the masabru, in the sadmat al-ula, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that true patience is exhibited in the very beginning when Sadamat in Urdu, right? Sadama, when something hits you, Saddam, the name comes from that. So when something strikes you and hits you hard, something, anything, an illness or something happens in your life, sabr and patience is what you exhibit at the initial stage, not afterwards. So if it's something that we thought, okay, time to make dua, time to make dhikr, time to make tawbah and return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and repentance. And alhamdulillah, it's a mercy. If not, then maybe not. So we should ask Allah to keep us in a state where we're grateful if we cannot handle these trials. Right, exactly. But that's the whole point. As a physician, you probably know that. I've heard that from other physicians too. Some people have a God complex, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hits them with something that they're perplexed. This is probably what causes the most panic amongst, I think, in retrospect, looking at the numbers, and the severity of it. Again, not downplaying the fact that it's something we should be concerned about, but it's not as perplexing, I think, to people than the fact. I think two things. One is it's so uncertain. They really don't know much about it, and that number two, it's going to overwhelm them. They're not prepared to take care of the amount of patience they may have. And you see, for us, again, it should be certain that this is the law. He does what he wants, and either way, it could go either way. Not only they're always projecting about the future, like worst case scenario. Maybe 2 million people might die. Allahu Alam. Okay, or the best case scenario. We should say that, well, in both cases, it could be worse than what you're projecting. It could also be better than what you're projecting. Allah Ta'ala can change a condition at any time. It could mutate and become something totally different, even worse than it is now, or it could just go away. That's all from Allah. You see, so it's good for us as Muslims now to focus on our tawheed. This is the whole point. Tawheed, as Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah ta'ala, is the greatest medicine in the time of trials like this, in a time of when we're dealing with these things. If you understand it that way, it shouldn't be much of a problem, even though we do, again, ask Allah for afiyah and protection, because we don't want to be tried with things, as this dua teaches us, that perhaps a little bit too much for our state of iman. So, bismillah. I mean, I can send some of these du'as to different people who request it. Maybe even we can create a group for that or something. I don't know. Allahu Alam. There is also the point of the hadith that I mentioned earlier. I wanted to clarify that the two hadith, the La Adwa that's in Sahih Bukhari, and the one after it, that don't allow your sick camel to drink water with the healthy camels. I wanted to just clarify that hadith, because I don't know if I explained it well enough last time, the meaning of it, the context, and how that proves to us that it's from Allah. However, we also respect the commandment of Allah when He creates something and makes something happen, that it's there for a purpose and it will fulfill its purpose. So we ask Allah. I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing. Of course, inshallah, if you can increase your ibadah and tawbah and make dua, this is something I've seen all the ulama across the world pretty much do the same thing, because this is something we should make tawbah right now, of our heedlessness and our sins, no matter whether we know of those sins or not. There's one dua that the Prophet told us, Allahumma ghfirni dhanbi kullah, that forgive all of my sins, diqqahu wa jillahu, the minor and the major, awwalahu wa akhirahu, the ones we committed in the beginning of our lives and even the ones we will commit later, wa alaniyatuhu wa sirra, and the ones that we have committed openly and the ones that we have committed secretly. So even the sins that we have committed that we're not aware of, we should make in general. This dua is a good dua to make, but we should make a general tawbah, tubu ilallahi tawbatan nasuha, that whatever it is we've done wrong, we make tawbah from it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. And tawbah, istighfar, has an incredible way of alleviating these problems and taking them away from us. Istaghfiru rabbakum innahu kana ghaffara. As the ayah says, ask Allah for forgiveness. Indeed, He is oft forgiving. يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُم مِّدْرَارًا, and He will send rain down upon you in succession, meaning abundant rain to grow crops for you and to bring better days for you. وَيُمْدِدْكُم بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ, and He will increase you also in your wealth and in your children. He will give you the things of this world as well. through this istighfar and through making tawbah, this will be alleviated, and you will have all the things that you may have lost in these trying times. They will all come back to you, and even more. Yumdidakum. It's not even like they will be replaced. You'll get them back. You'll become even more prosperous than you were before. The ayah that I last night was really eye-opening for me. Allah, you don't know. Allahu Alam what's going to happen after this. They're worried about the economy and this and that. And for them, it's not a good thing. As we read the rest of the ayah, at the end of the day, those who turn away from Allah, their end is always destruction. Even if it doesn't happen now, it'll happen at the time of death. But even for them, when this hardship is all over, then Allah Ta'ala will open up baba kulli shay. They'll get even more. Watch. Allahu Alam, right? They'll get even more than they had before. This is the way Allah works. Innamal usri yusra. And this is general, this is for everybody. But for us, our key is to focus on Allah. We know the commandment of Allah is there, but that focus is tawbah, istighfar. This opens up the same prayer for us as well. And of course, making dua, but also sadaqah is very important in this time. Because as the Prophet ﷺ said, if Allah Ta'ala, His anger is there, His punishment is there, the way that you extinguish it and you take it away is through giving sadaqah. So as much as we can, we should be doing that more often now. And don't worry too much about this, because it will pass. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy for all of us. And also, of course, the idea of masajid being shut, I think that's a very disturbing thing. We should make dua to Allah even just for that we should appreciate these masajid while we had them. I will reiterate that point, that many masajid unfortunately had become places where people had their own agendas. The masajid of the bayt of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are the houses of Allah. Udhina fiha an yudhkara ismuhu fiha. Right? These are places where the dhikr of Allah is the only thing that should be done there. Nothing else. I think we should probably pay attention to that and make an intention to that when this is all over, that we will make them places of His dhikr and try to avoid making them places where we do anything else. If you want to be sociable, I'm not against that. But we had each other. Why were we not sociable with each other outside of the masjid? That's the bigger question. And why did we not care about these things on a more communal level? Using a masjid as a platform to meet people like us, that's not really the point. The point of the masjid is ibadah and the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I hope that will change too in our communities, because perhaps this is one of the reasons Allah has allowed these places to be temporarily closed. But be careful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all afiyah and protect us. If there's any questions, inshallah, we can start.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Dickinson. Anyone has any questions? Please type in the chat window, and Brother Dickinson can answer that. Yeah, I don't think so. Looks like
No.
we're all good. Yeah, Jazakumullah khair, brother.
All right. So I have an idea for the next time we meet, inshallah.
I have a
yeah.
Go ahead.
So Imam, you were saying that prosperity leads to destruction. Can you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I've said it a few times, but I'll briefly talk about it now. See, the purposes of these, because this is something that has affected the whole world. So when it's at that level, the purpose, as the ayah says, it's for them to develop humility. As mashallah, some of us have said that people have a God complex, and their ideologies and ideas of the modern world have always been like that they thought they were going to create this perfect utopia, and people in any field of, like for instance in medicine, we're going to just cure everything, and nothing is beyond us and our capacity to extend life and to live a long prosperous life. And then Allah Ta'ala sends things to humble us. The issue is this: not all of us are going to be humbled. Yet Allah in His mercy will remove the affliction, and then after the affliction will give them more. Like, we'll give them more, and that it'll just, they already are blinded. They don't see Allah in this. They see, okay, we're going to make a vaccine. We're going to quarantine ourselves. We're going to give, like, we're going to spend some money from the federal government, give everyone a boost so the economy doesn't fall. You see where their focus is? Where is it for one moment on God, on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So they're not going to become humble. And once it's all over, they're going to attribute, like, do you think China, I mean, not all of them obviously, but do you think that after this is done, now they're reporting 0 cases? Now you can trust that or not, that's up to you. But do you think that they're going to thank Allah for that, or turn to Allah, or they're just going to mark it up to a victory? We made it. And then in the future, we're going to defeat this. This is the language. We're going to, develop the cure. We're going to do something that's all going to be good. It's not one of humility. Humility is that this is from Allah. We turn to Allah. We ask Allah for afiyah. Yes, it will be gone at some point, but this is the ajib. We're not panicking, but we should be scared in the sense that, yeah, it's the order of Allah. Allah is trying to give us a lesson here. Let us respect that. But the idea is that their destruction comes through that arrogance, that once the trial is lifted and everything becomes normal again, and the mercy of Allah the mercy of Allah is not contingent. He will open this, yeah, if you make istighfar, Allah will give you what you didn't have before. He'll give you more, right? But the person who's grateful, then after the trial, that gratitude will increase when Allah gives them that ease afterwards. The person who's ungrateful will simply chalk it up to their own accomplishments, and their arrogance will increase, and that will lead them. Now, in context of this ayah, is more about nations in the past who, before, as an example, before Fir'aun was drowned, they were also given the plague and other trials. And every time they came, they went to Musa alayhi salam, right? Make dua to your Lord and remove this from us, and then we'll become, we'll accept what you're saying. And they never did it. So it just increased their arrogance until the point that they destroyed themselves, and Allah destroyed them in this world. That's not going to happen now. There's some not complicated, but detailed answers to that. One is there's no prophet. Destruction at that level usually only comes after hujjah, after absolute proof is given to a people. And that absolute proof is through the personage of a prophet, any prophet. Since that's not there, absent that, that's not going to happen. What do I mean by that is that a whole-scale destruction of any nation or any people is not going to happen again. So it's going to be different in this case. It'll be gone. Unfortunately, many people will not get the lesson of humility. They will not accept that this was God's mercy. They'll chalk it up to their own accomplishments, that mashallah, our policies or our resilience, or maybe they will find a vaccine, whatever it is, they'll chalk it up to that. And then they'll say, we got through it, we did it. These are the key words, not acknowledging Allah or God in any of this. And then at the end of the day, that will increase their arrogance. So for these nations, they will not be destroyed in this world, but rather it's when they meet Allah